And here it is. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of 2024 / start of 2025. I'm actually not totally sure when this video will be going up, but welcome to my top games of the year list. Now, the usual disclaimers apply. This is not a list of my top games that came out this year, just the games that I played this year that I enjoyed the most for whatever reason. Because it's me, to borrow a phrase from Total Biscuits and the arbitrary awards back in the day, the nominations are purely arbitrary, and the order is also purely arbitrary. Anyways, I was actually going to get really convoluted and complex and have a whole awards type thing with categories and everything. But in the end, I just decided the sheer volume of footage I would have to get for that sort of project was a bit beyond the scope of my talents and what I could practically achieve within the couple of weeks that I'd have to pull this together at the end of the year. As this is the sort of thing also that I really enjoy doing off the cuff. But there is one thing I'm going to be changing up. I'm actually going to do my honorable mentions at the start for the games that, for whatever reason, they just didn't make the cut for, or the list this year. But I enjoyed them for another reason and wanted to talk about it nonetheless. So, to start out the honorable mentions, we have Final Fantasy VIII, which apparently this is unusual, I heard. I actually had a great time with Final Fantasy VIII. That's not the unusual thing. The unusual thing is that the mechanic a lot of the combat is built on, the junction system, where you suction magic from enemies and use that to cast spells. I actually liked that. I had a good time. I'm engaging with it, even if I did the bare minimum to get through things a lot, and I am definitely going to be coming back for another playthrough, maybe with a few overhaul mods in the future. But the reason this is an honorable mention is that I actually played most of Final Fantasy VIII last year, so given that it was majorly a 2023 playthrough, I didn't really feel right putting it on a 2024 list. That's really the only reason. Next on the list is Yes, Your Grace, which is one that I finished this year, and it was a lot of fun. Just the choices and interactions and the sort of XCOM-esque resource management and decision-making sort of thing it had going on, and the definitive variance between endings and such that there definitely are. It was really enjoyable. But this just falls prey to the fact that there were a lot of better games I played this year, and I just enjoyed a lot of them more, so this one got bumped down the list as a consequence of there just being things I liked more this year. And the next item on my list is on here for basically the same reason. That being Long Live the Queen, which I had a lot of fun experimenting with the different character paths and stuff, and just building basically a mage so that I can use magic to do everything and know nothing about warfare or navy or anything. So some interesting things unfolded as a result of some of the paths that I took in that game. And again, it was fun, but in general, the whole cutesy art style of the game was also just not really my thing. I get that it appeals to a very specific demographic, and I'm not saying the art style was a bad design choice or anything, but just for me, it was not my sort of art style. And again, there's just a lot of other things I played this year that I had more fun with. Not to say Long Live the Queen is a bad game or anything, far from it. Next on the list is Blackwell Unbound, which, if you're aware of these sorts of games, it's a puzzle game and a choose-your-own-adventure, sort of in the style of the old LucasArts point-and-click games, which I played a few of. But the thing is, and anyone who knows me or has watched me try to solve puzzles in a Let's Play will know this, but I'm really bad at puzzles. Like, I am bad. I've had puzzles I've tried to solve where I'm literally sitting there, gazing at the exact solution staring me dead in the eye, and I will fail to solve it. And if you have watched my Secret of Monkey Island playthrough I did on the channel a few years back, you know this, because in that, I basically had to use the hint button every few seconds just to solve most of the puzzles, because I was doing so horribly at it. Puzzle games and me, we just do not get along well at all. We just don't. And that's a large part of why Blackwell Unbound is here, because of how horrifically bad I am at puzzle games. I had to use a walkthrough that I googled for in order to get through most of the puzzles. As such, just because of how bad I am at this sort of game and that whole thing, I had less fun than I would have if I was the sort of gamer to enjoy puzzle games a lot more. Which is why it's on the honorable mentions, because I can recognize it's a good game, and the bits with the vibe and atmosphere and things, I did have a good time with. It's just not the sort of game I see myself ever coming back to, which always causes me to rate things lower for the most part, with a few exceptions. But, moving on from that, next on my list of honorable mentions is We the Revolution, which this game could be considered a little bit obscure, so I want to mention actually what it is. It's a sort of leadership politics as kind of game of faction balancing. It's set during the French Revolution. So it's basically all about you choosing who to let live and who to kill, and you will piss off or endear yourself to the different political factions based on your decisions. And there's like some major stuff that happens at different points, and the big balancing act is trying to both do your job the way you're meant to and stay in your family's good books. It's interesting, but it suffers from a problem that a lot of these sorts of management games have, where if you're not careful with how you're balancing things, you can put yourself in a situation where no matter what you do, you're going to get a bad ending and have to start over, which is what I had happen in my own playthrough, because I never actually finished this game. I got within 1-2 in-game days of the next major event, but I was at a point where it didn't matter which choice I chose for kill or execute a certain path, it was going to piss people off and make it so that it would get killed or deposed. And just sort of the fact that I got locked into a no-win scenario like that, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I enjoyed playing the game and the concept was very interesting. Just the way it ended made me like it a lot less than other things. But moving on, the next game on our honorable mentions is Murdered Soul Suspect, which is a very interesting take on the whole mystery and puzzle type of game, and one of the few times I found myself genuinely enjoying one of these because it's a mystery solving, like I said, quasi puzzle sort of game where you're playing as a ghost, and the twist is you are investigating your own murder, which is a very interesting concept, and I really liked it. Even if some of the bits were a little bit janky, and I could tell some bits of it were not quite as polished as it could have been. And honestly, with this, it's a damn shame there's never going to be a Murdered Soul Suspect 2. If you're not aware, the developers that made this game were closed down by Square Enix a few years back, so yeah, dead franchise. And this is another one that the reason it's an honorable mention, not on the base list, is just because it found itself below other games that I thought deserved a spot on the main list a bit more. Next on the list of honorable mentions is Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. See, I actually played both Xenoverse 1 and Xenoverse 2 this year, but in general, I'm not the biggest fan of fighting games, and Xenoverse 2 is the one that I had the best time with. So, I only really wanted one of them on the honorable mentions, although this is kind of my feelings on them both are kind of lumped together. I've always been rather meh on fighting games. Don't get me wrong, Xenoverse 2 is a solid game, and I hear there's a pretty decent online scene. I never interact with that whole thing, basically, at all. Anyways, the thing with Xenoverse 2 that puts it on the honorable mentions, as you can probably guess, is it being a fighting game, and just my very ambivalent feelings towards the fighting genre in general. There's always been one or two fighting games that pop up that I have a good time with, but none of them have ever been so good as to merit a spot in the top games of the year list. Although, to be fair, I still have yet to play any of the Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter games. Yes, I know this makes me a barbarian. But yeah, just because of all of that, Xenoverse 2 is an honorable mention. Okay, next honorable mention, Assassin's Creed Rogue. Now, spoilers for later in the list, but there's a lot of Assassin's Creed games on my list this year. Rogue is, of the lot of them, if I'm being completely honest, the one I had the least amount of fun with. Like, the story was decent and all, and seeing the assassins being portrayed as the bad guys was an interesting take on things, I suppose, but this game unfortunately committed the cardinal sin of portraying the good guys as the bad guys by basically making them into mustache-twirling megalomaniacs. And it doesn't do anything to differentiate itself from the other Assassin's Creed games. It's basically you're a Templar, but they've just painted over the word assassin and put Templar there. That is the extent of it. And after playing Assassin's Creed 3, even if I knew this was a bit of a minor spin-off and such, after playing 3, Rogue was really kind of a disappointment in some respects, because even if it is supposed to be smaller, just because of how similar it was, I couldn't help but be comparing it to Assassin's Creed 3. which did not help the game's case in the slightest. Moving on to the next one on my honorable mentions, we have another Assassin's Creed. Unity this time. Yes, Unity made it high enough to be an honorable mention. Now, I was actually debating whether or not I should extend the top list and give Unity a full spot, but in the end, I just decided there were other games that I had a lot better time with, which deserved spots on the main list more. So that relegated Unity to a very high spot in the honorable mentions instead. Which I know a lot of people like to roast Unity for being in such a terrible state that it was technically when it released, but keep in mind, I didn't play Unity at release. So those horrific abominations of bugs that everyone likes to talk about, I didn't experience any of that. I got the game in the state it is in 2024, and the state it is actually, I would say, a fairly solid entry for the Assassin's Creed franchise. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking or anything, and there are definitely plenty of games in the series that are a lot better. Even some of the more recent ones, which I know it's common to dunk on those, but even those, I think in a lot of ways, be considered better than Unity, but it was still a fun time, and some of the mechanics and concepts they put in the game in Unity, I think were really well done and solid ideas. In some cases, things that I wish would have stayed in the series. Now, next on my honorable mentions is Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. Again, this falls into the category of being one of those puzzle games. And I can already hear the people screaming in the comments. Hellblade is an action-adventure game. It's a fighting game. It's not a puzzle game. I'm sorry, but you are wrong. The combat is set-piece dressing. It's there to give you something to do in between puzzles. You spend more time solving the puzzles, and the puzzles are the thing that stick out the most in terms of what you're doing compared to the combat moments. The combat moments are brief little slice of life things. Then you spend the rest of your time navigating the areas and having to solve the door puzzles to get through gates and things. That is the very definition of a puzzle thing. And it's more cinematic combat moments that are there to add some action feel to the world than anything else. And just because of that, and just my personal feeling on puzzle games and the fact that the combat felt really boring a lot of times, Senua's Sacrifice did not gel with me very well. I know a lot of people think really highly of this game, but and I can see how it had some great story moments and plot and narrative things, and I appreciated those parts. In terms of the gameplay, the puzzles, the combat, all of that, I just did not feel like it was good enough to merit a spot on the main list. And now for the final two entries on the list, which, since they're on here for identical reasons, I'm just going to combine them into one. The next two honorable mentions are Final Fantasy V and Final Fantasy VI, which the reason they are on here is very simple. I played the lion's share of both of these games last year and am only finishing them this year, so I thought it would be worth giving them an honorable mention since I did fully complete the games this year. The thing was, since I actually finished the majority of the game, it just felt wrong to put them on the main list when I basically beat them last year and am just tying the ribbon, so to speak, this year. Again, very solid games, and I absolutely adore them both, and you better believe I'm going to be coming back for additional playthroughs, and in the case of Final Fantasy VI, I'm starting to look at the ROM hack scene for those, and finding some very compelling stuff that I am definitely going to give a good look at. But that's the last of my honorable mentions. So now it's time to move on to the list proper. Alright, now we've got that out of the way, go ahead and move on to the actual list beyond just the honorable mentions. And it's quite a long list, so brace yourselves. Alright, in at number 18 we have Assassin's Creed 3. So, you probably know this because I bring it up on Twitter and in my videos from time to time, but I've been playing through most of the Assassin's Creed games as of lately, because I actually have Let's Plays of a couple of the early ones up on the channel for the original Assassin's Creed, which I plan to redo at some point, just to get a better Let's Play of that out there, as well as Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood and Revelations. I was originally planning to record my playthrough of AC3, but that just ended up not happening, because I started recording it for some testing and just had too much fun to stop and couldn't be bothered to record, is the long and short of it. And honestly, at the end of things, I'm glad I didn't bother to record it, because with the Assassin's Creed games, after the first 4, I feel like they're the sort of games that I have more fun with just playing on my own time than making content out of them. So, really, we're probably both better off this way. But as to how I feel about the games, I can't exactly complain in terms of Assassin's Creed 3. It's not something I have a whole lot to complain about, but at the same time, it's also not a game that I feel was spectacular, hence why it's so low on the list. Because Assassin's Creed as a series has always seemed like it doesn't know what it wants to be. It doesn't want to be a stealthy assassin game or an action combat one where you sometimes stab people while not being seen. The series never seems like it's able to make up its mind on that. And AC3, you definitely get that feeling. As they try to make the combat harder in some aspects so that you want to engage more with the stealth systems. The problem is that stealth in Assassin's Creed is just really, really bad. Really, really bad. And that shows in a lot of ways. Honestly, the thing that I've always enjoyed in the series is the getting to play around in a cool historical sandbox and just having fun messing around in their history simulation. Because I tend to basically ignore the modern day story. It never really managed to grasp me in the same way the historical stuff did. Like, at all. Which is why this is number 18 on my list, because it's a solid game, but it doesn't really do anything spectacular. So, moving on to number 17, we have Big Ambitions. Now, Big Ambitions is a bit of a niche title, so this one might need a little bit of explanation, because I imagine there's at least a few people who will not actually know what this game is. So, Big Ambitions is a life business sim hybrid. It's sort of like The Sims, except it's sort of like a cross between The Sims and Startup Company, where you're trying to build a business and make money and everything and get rich and all that bullcrap. But you also have to deal with needs and all the typical life sim things, which it's a cool concept, and I'm definitely having fun with the game. However, another factor to this one, and why I didn't want to put it higher on the list, is that this is an early access game, so while the content that is there is fun, it also, you could tell that it's still a work in progress and still being polished, and in a lot of the gameplay systems, that really shows. But at the same time, for the Sims type of games that also incorporate the business and economics aspects of things, you don't see many of those. In fact, I can't think of any others off the top of my head. And I definitely had fun with it, which, this is my list, damn it. If I want to put something on here just because I had fun with it, I will. But enough about that. Number 16 on my list is Borderlands. Yes. After around 8 years after me starting my first initial playthrough of it, I finally actually beat Borderlands this year, and I had fun with it. I really did. It is a first-person shooter, which is going to limit its impact for me, because one thing that's really not a surprise is that in terms of my tastes as a gamer, first-person shooters are generally a genre that does not appeal to me very much at all. It just never has. There's a small handful of them that I actually like, but generally speaking, I haven't played many first-person shooters that I've liked. Borderlands is one of the few exceptions, and in terms of the whole looter-shooter type of game, of shoot enemy, kill enemy, get loot, upgrade character kind of loop, there's only a handful of that type that I've tried and had fun with. Even fewer than first-person shooters in general. And this definitely fell into that camp, which helped it out a great deal. In terms of that particular list, Destiny 2 used to be on it, but that game, for me, just started being less and less fun the more I played it. To the point where now, I don't even have the thing installed. I just don't. And Borderlands, I don't particularly care for the story, I'm not gonna lie, but the gunplay and just playing through the game in general and the combat and everything, it was solid and a lot of fun, and I really liked it. And I'm currently planning to start my playthrough of Borderlands 2 when I find the time. I played a little bit of it a couple of years ago, but that I never got very far with. And I don't even remember why. But yeah, great, solid game. Would absolutely recommend. just as long as you're prepared to ignore the story, because if I'm being honest, it's not very good. Number 15 on my list now, we have Beyond Two Souls. This was the year that I played basically all of the David Cage games, because this year I completed Beyond Two Souls, Detroit Become Human, and Heavy Rain. And you'll notice that Heavy Rain wasn't even on my honorable mentions. That's because, I'm not gonna lie, I actually thought it was a very bad game. I did not like Heavy Rain at all. I thought it was kind of annoying and contrived, and the detective bits with what's-his-face with the sci-fi glasses or whatever were pretty cool, but other than that, a lot of it I didn't really like. This entry is about Beyond Two Souls, not Heavy Rain. And Beyond Two Souls I actually thought was really nice. For one thing, I actually like Jodie as a character. I think she is great and decently written enough that when something is a little bit contrived, I'm willing to ignore it because it's not very often. And I just think the plot it's good enough. I won't say it's excellent or amazing, but it's good enough, and I enjoyed the storytelling, even with how railroady it was. But I went into this game fully expecting to be railroaded into everything, and I certainly was. Although, I will say, I probably would have had a better time and been slightly less confused had I played the game on the version of events that puts it in chronological order, rather than the other one. I forget what they're called, but if you've played, you probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that probably would have helped. Although, the one gripe I have is that I have to say that bit at the end with Nathan, and I'm trying to be as vague as I can to avoid spoilers because this game is pretty massive on the story. It's basically the whole game, so I don't want to spoil if I can avoid it. A bit at the end with Nathan and how that caused certain other things to happen, in some ways it felt like it came out of nowhere. Like, yeah, you had the thing that led up to it, but they didn't really do a good enough job of building it up to give you the impression that this was an outcome you should have expected to happen, or for you to have been able to see it coming. So in some ways it kind of felt like out of nowhere, but not enough so that it bothered me so much I actually stopped playing, or that ruined my enjoyment or anything. I still like the game, even if I do have some issues with it. But the reason it's so hard down the list is there's plenty of stuff that I played this year I just had more fun with. And to move on to one of them, for number 14, we have Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Remake. Because this was the year that I finally got to the Crisis Core Remake and the base game of Final Fantasy VII also. Yeah, the Crisis Core Remake. I thought it was good. I never actually played the original Crisis Core, which I think it was on the PSP. I never actually had the opportunity to play that because this was before I started playing Final Fantasy games. So I didn't really know it existed at the time it came out. And I only very briefly owned a PSP. But again, I thought it was very solid, and it was kind of cool to be able to see all the backstory and things, although the fact that I played it after the Final Fantasy VII Remake means that I did actually how do I phrase this? Well, because of the fact that I beat Final Fantasy VII Remake first, and just because of pop culture osmosis, I had some idea of what the events were prior to Final Fantasy VII that led to that game. I did kind of know some of what was coming at the end, but to be honest, that kind of heightened the impact. I was even more anticipating the stuff I knew that was going to happen that I couldn't avoid and hoping I somehow could avoid it, and it was kind of awesome. It was kind of, in that respect, like playing Halo Reach for the first time. I'm like, spoilers for Halo Reach incoming, but you know Reach is gonna fall. You know the Covenant take it out, but you still feel like maybe you can do something. Maybe you can stop it. And then slowly learn that no, in fact, you cannot. It's sort of like that whole thing. But yeah, Final Fantasy Crisis Core. Very solid game, but also the kind of game that I don't think I'll be playing a second time. It's just the sort that it's a good singular experience, but I don't really feel like I'll ever be going back to it to do a second playthrough or anything. And next on my list, at number 13, is Hogwarts Legacy. I may catch some flack for this one, but I honestly don't care. I finally finished this game this year. I actually started playing this when it originally came out, because that's around the time that I got it, and I just, for whatever reason, I think I had some performance issues going on, and I wanted to wait until I had better hardware to play it. Anyways, I finally got to reinstalling the game and playing it all the way through from where I was to the end this year. And I did enjoy it, but, and this is going to be a theme with a lot of games, I think. A lot of the very specific type of ones, where it's the sort of game that, for me, it's a single playthrough, and it was a single good playthrough. I had fun, but I also don't feel like there was much replay value to the game. After I played it the one time, I felt like I got everything I could out of it. Now, that being said, I didn't finish everything there was to do. Like, there's an epilogue bit at the end you can get if you push your character to a certain level, and I think you unlock some extra stuff if you do all the side quests, which I did not, because there's some particularly asinine collect all these items ones, and these quests you get in games that just have you collecting a certain number of a specific item across the map for some minor reward that isn't really that worth it, so you just waste your time collecting things. I've never been a fan of those. But in terms of the story and everything, I enjoyed it. I had fun with my time in Hogwarts Legacy, but like I said, I don't think I'll ever be going back for a second playthrough. And also, and this may be a touch controversial for the people who enjoyed the game, but honestly, I don't feel like it being open world added much to the game. I felt like that might have just been a way to pad out the experience and get you to spend more hours in it, because I feel like this could have done just as well had it been a narrative, linear action adventure game with some light exploration rather than a full open world, I think that could have done it just as well. But I'm sure there are plenty of people who disagree with that. That was just the feeling that I had about the game. Anyways, with Hogwarts Legacy done and dusted, time to move on to my number 12, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Yes, I actually played quite a lot of Assassin's Creed games this year, as you will notice from the list. And I did mention that earlier when we were talking about Assassin's Creed Unity in the honorable mentions, but yeah, Odyssey. So you may recall that I played Assassin's Creed Origins last year, and I know there are some people who didn't like Odyssey because they felt like it was quite grindy, and there were some accusations going around for a time that it was deliberately made grindy in order to sell XP boost microtransactions. But I'm going to be honest, and this may be a side effect of the way I play RPGs, specifically open world Skyrim style RPGs, but I never felt like I was so underleveled I had to spend money to level up faster. That being said, what I did feel was that sometimes the quests I wanted to do were especially high level compared to me, so sometimes I had to put off doing the content I actually wanted to do in order to gain more experience, which did get a tiny bit annoying at times, because sometimes I just want to be able to skip side quests, and I've always felt like side quests should be optional. They are, as the name implies, side content, but with Odyssey, if you want to manage to get through all of the main story beats, then you either have to do a ridiculous amount of grinding, or all of the side quests, which did not sit well with some people I know. But in terms of the actual story, I really liked it. You know, I'm just thinking this now, but I must be one of the few people who actually liked the fantasy and mythological elements in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, because I thought those were pretty cool. And again, I also tend to basically ignore the main plot, the modern day plot, I should say, of the Assassin's Creed games. As I've said before, it didn't grab me when it was the Desmond plot, and it certainly doesn't now with whatever her name is. Lana? I forget. You can see how much attention I'm paying. Anyways, there was the actual storyline. I thought it was really fun, and I enjoyed the portrayal of ancient Greece. I think it was a cool setting. And that is what I play Assassin's Creed games for the most part. To be able to run around in and stab people in a cool historical sandbox, which is what I got. Okay. Now, time to move on to number 11. Detroit Become Human. So yeah, we have more David Cage on the list, as you probably saw coming. Honestly, I think between the three that I played this year, Detroit is probably my favorite, with Beyond Two Souls being a close second. I really like the characters in this one, and unlike Beyond Two Souls, which had fairly consistent characters that didn't really get the opportunity to change much beyond Jodie's angsty teenage phase that we got to see in my playthrough. Beyond that, there wasn't a whole lot of character change outside of some very specific types of interactions, which were predictable and followed on from what they had. Detroit, you got a whole load of character development and characters learning, and sanctimonious assholes I really wanted to punch. Looking at you, Reed. Looking at you. So yeah, I really had a ton of fun with this one. Despite how on rails and see what's coming that it was, this is going to remain my favorite of them, and it's one I can see myself booting up again in the future just to play through again and see some of the different story paths, or just re-experience the ones that I saw the last time. I could definitely see either of those happening. Definitely. And honestly, I think Kara and Alice have to be my two favorite characters in the story. I just really like Kara, and Alice is adorable and wonderful and the best ever, and if you disagree, you are wrong, and I will fight you on the side of the street. That is all. So yeah, story games, for me, it's always been a thing where I know how I feel and why I like it so much, but in some cases I kind of struggle to articulate that into words, which is less the case with Detroit, because I just really enjoyed the narrative arcs and the character development, and the fact that your choices actually had meaningful impact on which path things went down, even if that wasn't every single choice ever. But let's be fair here. If every single decision you ever made in a game ever had meaningful impact on the story, then no story-based game would ever be made again, because that would take an eternity to finish. But now for number 10. And number 10 on our list is Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Yes, I know, there's rather a lot of Assassin's Creed on my list. It just sort of happened that way, because I beat all but like 2 or 3 of the games this year. In fact, at this point, the only Assassin's Creed games I hadn't finished by the end of 2024 were actually Assassin's Creed Black Flag, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and Liberation, I think, which Liberation I tried and dropped like a hot potato, and I'm not coming back to that one, so don't ask. Anyways, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, it was actually really neat. The idea of controlling 2 characters who you can do the thing that one is good at with the other, but leaning them into their strength is definitely better, and also having each character have a place in the overall story and their own path to follow, so it's not just pick the one you like and do their things, but just parallel paths that you follow one and then the other in groups. I think the way they did it is really neat. And just to lean in on this a little bit, there was a thing that Assassin's Creed Unity did, which Syndicate kept on with, and I really wish it would have stayed for some of the later games. I'm talking about something they did with the assassinations, because unlike the previous games and all the ones to come after this, in Syndicate and Unity, assassinations weren't just assassinations. You actually had little mini objectives, almost like side quests within an assassination. And the areas were substantially larger, also. So you had stuff you could do to make your job easier. So, if your target was, say, and I'm going to use examples that are different than what's in the game, just so you know. If your target was a diplomat, and you know they're going to have armed guards protecting them, then there might be an option to steal a map of the patrol routes so you know where the guards are going to be when. To sabotage the gunpowder so that when the guards go to resupply the guns, they get dud powders in one of their sets of weapons, so they're a little slower to react, so you have a second to kill the guy before they can shoot you dead. Or, and this would be the hardest one of all because it would make it a lot easier, you might be able to kill a guard and take their place, and then find your way up to your target and kill them in relative security. And there's like all sorts of options and little things you can do, which are like side quests and little objectives within an individual assassination. Plus, these assassinations have the biggest areas of any Assassin's Creed assassination areas that I can remember. And honestly, that was a great concept, and it was a damn shame that they didn't keep it, because I really liked the idea of side objectives within assassinations. I think it added a lot. And now, in at number 9, we have Dark Souls 2. I started playing Dark Souls 2 this year, and I know in terms of the Dark Souls series, it is not as well received in general compared to like Dark Souls 1, Sekiro, and Dark Souls 3, and the like. But I am enjoying it immensely. And yes, I play the Souls games. I might be an enormous pansy when it comes to most games, but this is the one exception. And honestly, I really like the whole environmental storytelling and having elements in the story that are hinted at rather than outright told to you. It's one of my favorite aspects of the Souls games, and Dark Souls 2, for all of its flaws, does spectacularly at weaving those little hints at existing additional narrative you can go and look for into it. It does an excellent job at that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what else is out there for me to find. Abso-freaking-lutely. And the combat in Dark Souls 2, as is tradition in the Souls games, is absolutely mental. Absolutely mental. And the standard enemy mobs, when it comes to just general enemies, interestingly enough, it feels like they're both easier and harder. harder because sometimes the placement, positioning, just general damage feels like bullshit, as do several specific bosses. Easier because in Dark Souls 2, they decided to do a thing where if you kill a certain mob a specific number of times, then that particular enemy will actually despawn forever if you kill them enough. So you can basically depopulate entire areas. I think it was probably done as an anti-grinding mechanic, so you can't just infinitely grind souls for the rest of forever, but it is kind of interesting how it makes it so that you can just repeatedly kill enemies until they despawn to be able to run through part of an area without having to kill the mobs. That is interesting design, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. But yeah, I haven't actually beat Dark Souls 2 yet. I'm somewhere just before the castle. And that whole thing. I haven't quite reached that yet, though I'm getting very close. And I'm looking forward to seeing where that game goes. And now, at number 8, we have Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a game that was actually on my bucket list for quite a while. I picked it up on a sale on GOG a couple of years back. And yeah, Zero Dawn. I still haven't bought Horizon Forbidden West, but I plan to check that one out eventually. Just because I had so much fun with Zero Dawn, I figure I'll probably have at least a solid experience in Forbidden West when I finally get around to that, but Horizon Zero Dawn is one of the few games in the open world, climb the tower, do all the objectives, Ubisoft type open world games that I've played in a long time that I feel like actually did some stuff to make it feel different than the typical game of that type. And I'm not just talking about the aesthetic of post-apocalyptic Stone Age hunting metallic dinosaurs thing, although I did like that, and that is cool. And how it and honestly, the story and the emergent narrative of the world is a big part of why I liked that game so much. It was also really neat how the viewpoint towers, in this case the tall necks, actually moved, so there was a small amount of strategy in getting yourself onto those. And in a lot of cases, I actually had enough fun with some of the side stories and things like that I just wanted to keep finding more and more and more to do. I probably didn't even finish everything there was in this game. I just eventually had to tell myself, no, stop doing side stories, do the main quest. Because otherwise I never would have stopped. I was just having so much fun with this game. And for context, I did play it on the easiest difficulty just because I wanted to do a playthrough solely for the story. And I think sometime I'm actually going to go back and do a playthrough on the hardest difficulty and actually fully engage with all the crafting and the traps and all the mechanics. Because for the brief period where I did that, before I decided I was more interested in seeing the story than having to work out the best strategy to win a particular fight, I did have a lot of fun, and the systems were really great, but honestly, this game, I can't remember the last time a game managed to do such a spectacular job at making me both hate and empathize with different characters that I never even met in the game, that I just see recordings of and read diaries from them, and that sort of thing. The fact that it can make you feel so strongly about characters you never meet in game in an official capacity, they really did a bang-up job with this one. They really did. And I had a great time with it. So that's it for Horizon Zero Dawn. For number 7 on my list, we have one that's a little different than a lot of what you've seen on my lists in the past. We have Distant Worlds Universe. Now, Distant Worlds is, in a lot of ways, very similar to Stellaris. In fact, this description is really incomplete and probably doesn't do it justice. But the best way I've come up with to describe Distant Worlds Universe to people who aren't familiar with the game is to say that it's what you would get if Stellaris and Victoria 2 had a baby. Because it really does feel like a combination of the logistic, economic, and population systems similar to Victoria, but on a slightly smaller scale, and the Galactic-esque Forex systems and things from Stellaris, just with some more immersion elements, and it's a lot of fun. So basically, Distant Worlds Universe is a space strategy game. I've only played one very specific start, so I can only give you context from that one. There's a start called the Dark Age. It's a sort of technological Dark Age, basically, and what it is there's some sort of apocalypse or great war in the past, and it destroyed most civilizations, so everyone starts on a single planet. They have no access to faster than light technology or anything. You have to rediscover that kind of thing over time. But the pirates still have all that, so you have to deal with them being a threat while trying to build up an intergalactic empire, get diplomatic relations and colonize planets and all of that. And eventually you start going to war with people too. But honestly, the exploration and building up your forces and trying to get into a position where the pirates would not squish your entire empire if they sneezed on you is the most engaging part to me, just that early build-up. And the economy is... I managed to make a pretty deep and engaging economy too, where you have the economy of the state and private enterprise, so they're both technically part of your economy, but you can only control one of them, and just by having private enterprise, they sometimes use your starports to build ships for shipping goods and things, so they will just give you money sometimes for the stuff that they do. Which is helpful, and I guess kind of simulates taxes in a way? I don't know. I'm still learning this game. I have quite a few hours put into it, but I still do not know the game all that well. Like, at all. I'm working on it, but at the size of this one, that's going to take me a while. And now, in that's number 6, we have Satisfactory. Yes, that game that I played earlier this year in 2025 when I had a VTuber avatar in the corner for the first and only time in this channel's history, is on my Game of the Year list. That's right. So, I should probably briefly take a moment to explain what the game is, although I imagine more than a few people already know. Anyways, Satisfactory is a factory building game. It's actually very similar to Factorio in the sense that your goal is to automate things and make production lines so that you can automate things and make a more efficient production line, on and on and on, with the ultimate end goal being to make a space elevator and save the world, according to the not at all menacing AI who gives you your marching orders. Yes, save the world. Your goal is to save the world. And probably build some really horrifically bad spaghetti conveyor belts along the way. Because spaghetti conveyor belts are a rite of passage in factory building games, if you ask me. They just are. They just are. But yeah, there's something about optimization and efficiency in this sort of games I just find incredibly compelling. It's like, it's a problem-solving thing. And as someone whose primary hobby is computer programming, I find the idea of optimizing and min-maxing there very similar to writing code in some bizarre way. Yeah, and my first playthrough with Satisfactory after the 1.0 release, because the game was actually in early access for the absolute longest time, and it only fully released very recently. In fact, back in September's when this game came out. And I only played it a little bit in the early access because I picked it up because it was cheap and then just sat on it while I waited for the early access to release. And this has tons of stuff in it now, and honestly, I am going to be diving into this no end. Going forward, I think. That is a fairly safe assumption. I am just going to keep on diving on in. And I really enjoy the challenge of trying to make the most efficient, optimized, and streamlined production line that I possibly can. Even though I know it's going to look abominably horrific as a result of the fact that I'm just bad at making good-looking factories. I just don't care. I'm fully aware of the fact that I'm bad at it. I simply do not care that I am bad at it. I will keep on trying until eventually my factories look like works of art, or I feel like screaming and crying at their badness. Probably both. But, moving on to number 5, we have Crusader Kings 2. Yeah, you knew this was coming, I'm sure. After all, what's a top games I played this year list without the best baby murder incest simulation that has ever been produced by the video games industry? I know Crusader Kings 3 is out and has a lot of DLC, and it is in some regards, a pretty good game, but for one, I don't have all the DLC, and in a lot of aspects, I just prefer Crusader Kings 2 over 3. When you're talking about just purely immersion and emergent storytelling, I feel like there's the option for a lot more crazy shit to happen in CK2 compared to 3. It's just one of those games where things are a lot less predictable and basically anything can happen, which just makes the stories that come out of the game that much more interesting than anything you get in CK3. I keep CK3 for one very particular reason. There's one thing that I play through Crusader Kings 3 without fail, and that is Elder Kings 2, the Elder Scrolls Total Conversion mod, which the CK3 version is just a lot better than the original Elder Kings for Crusader Kings 2. But CK2 remains that game that just, its best aspect is and will always be the opportunity to craft some historical sandbox stories in a very unpredictable setting, and it is never not going to be one of my favorite games of all time. Honestly, if I had to make a favorite games of all time list, and I'm probably never going to do that because it would take forever and I would never ever make up my mind on half of what should be on that list, but if I ever did, I can tell you Crusader Kings 2 would be on that list. But enough about top games of all time lists. This is my top games of this year. And next on this list is Final Fantasy IX, which I finally played and beat this year. And honestly, it was pretty neat. I had a lot of fun with it. In a lot of aspects, though, I think my FF7, FF8 love might be hitting me with some blind nostalgia feels, because I really did, in a lot of ways, prefer those games over Final Fantasy IX. That's not to say that Final Fantasy IX is a bad game, mind you. Like, if Final Fantasy VII was a 9.5 out of 10, then Final Fantasy IX, I would say, is an 8 out of 10. It's still an amazing game, I just like those ones more. And I can say for sure that I really liked the story, in spite of me saying that I like 7 more. And I had a lot of fun with it. I appreciated how they portrayed everything. And it is pretty cool that there could be so much to do that I basically finished the whole game, and I know for a fact there's still plenty of stuff that I missed out on and will want to go back and do again, because that just gives me the opportunity to go back for a second playthrough. This is one of those games that I can absolutely see myself coming back to and playing again dozens and dozens of times over, and still having just as much fun. As, man, oh man, was the time I was in this game for very well spent. And in at number 3, we have Guild Wars 2. Guild Wars 2. Now, this is a game that I'm always coming back to. I always have a good time playing, and I also tend to play sporadically and just sort of hop into every now and then, but still never fail to have fun with. And it's also one where I have most definitely not done all of the things that I could do, even on a single character. Like, they're introducing new story beats and new plot moments in this MMO so fast that I am still ridiculously far behind. One day I'll catch up, but I'm honestly in no hurry. I'm just experiencing it and exploring the world. And this is something I brought up in a couple of past videos where I mentioned Guild Wars 2, but one thing it does particularly well that I haven't seen in any other MMO, any other RPG even, is the fact that Guild Wars 2 is one of the few games that actually rewards you for exploring. It will actually give you more experience for exploring the map and a bunch more for fully completing the map, which I rarely actually do, even with that. But I appreciate that they actually take the time to reward map exploration, which in a lot of games, and even more so in MMOs, you just sort of see as a chore. It's a thing you do to get it out of the way, and then you just kind of forget about it. It's not a big deal. Or you'll do as little as you possibly can to get where the story demands you be. But other than just that, I wanted to touch very briefly on the combat systems. Because Guild Wars 2 has some great combat systems. Not only are there plenty of perks, things you can choose from to level up your character, and loads of skill trees and optional builds that you can do only once you reach max level. This game utilizes a system that I really like called vertical progression. So what I like is with Guild Wars 2, I can hop in, play for a few minutes, and then come back 6 months to 3 years later, and my characters will still be just as powerful, and their gear will still be just as relevant as it was before. Like, I looked around on this, and they have not introduced any gear to the game that just flat out raises your power level. Basically, at all. They did that one time, a little bit. One time. I don't actually know when it was, because that was way before I started. But yeah, that happened once, and then there was another that was just for aesthetics. And they've just been doing the sideway progression thing since. And it's apparently been working quite well, because I can't think of another MMO that does progression like that, and I've always found the combat in this game to be very satisfying and quite rewarding. But maybe there is an MMO other than Guild Wars 2 that does that, and I'm just not aware of. I've only played a handful of MMOs after all. But now, it's time to move on to number 2. And for number 2, we have No Man's Sky. Yeah. I've actually been playing quite a bit of No Man's Sky this year. It's been a game that I always dip my toes into, play for a bit, and then leave, but space exploration games with some optional settlement building, it just lets me do my own thing like that, at my own pace. So I really like. There is apparently a story to this game, but I'm super early on in it. I've just been having a blast with the exploration and the quests and doing missions all over and things. That's because I just find that to be a ton of fun, just being able to hop in my ship, go somewhere, mine some more, or kill someone. And they did a great job at making everything engaging, pretty much. As far as I've seen, I haven't run into a single activity that I thought was boring. Although, granted, the tutorial is a little grating. It does kind of drag on a little bit. But given how wonderful everything else has been so far, and especially compared to Todd Howard's unholy abomination that was Starfield, well, I think we can say that this is absolutely a game to be checking out. I know that there was some stuff going on around release, but to be honest, I missed all of that. I didn't discover this game until like a year or two ago, so it was already well developed and past that by the time I got into playing it. And I got it on sale for like $20. This is a game that is on sale often, so I encourage you to take advantage of that. It's a good one. It is absolutely a good one. Really, I can't say enough positive stuff about No Man's Sky. It's just a great experience, and I have a lot of fun with it. Although, it does fall into the camp of being one of those games that I feel is better played by yourself or with a small group of friends and not recorded for YouTube or anything, because there is a lot of downtime, which, if that's not your thing, that might be a problem for you. I don't know. I personally have no issue with downtime in games, so it doesn't bother me. But that's going to do it for No Man's Sky. And for number one, the game that I had the most fun playing this year, we have Final Fantasy XIV. Yeah, I know. In the year that we had Dawn Trail, which is arguably somewhat on the controversial side, I'm going to list Final Fantasy XIV as a game that I had the most fun with, but I'm going to be honest, I just had a blast playing through Dawn Trail and in general just playing the dungeons and everything, and 2024 was also the year that I decided to start maining a healer in Final Fantasy XIV, which has been a lot of fun. And again, I will remind people who take issue with this, this list is based on my personal tastes, and I had a lot of fun in 14 this year. And that does indeed include Dawn Trail. I had fun with it. I thought it was an enjoyable experience. And I should also preface this by saying that actually, I was one of the rare crowd of people who thought that the story and writing and everything in Realm Reborn was also quite good. I actually had a good time with that as well, and I thought Dawn Trail, in some ways you could say it was along that same barometer, but I also feel like you need to take into account that this is setting up a brand new story arc and not continuing one that's going for like 10 years. So, it's gonna be slow at first. You're going on vacation after all. I don't know why people would expect anything else, really. I honestly don't. But maybe you just got so used to all the action being piled on that it felt like a step down, which I can certainly appreciate. But yeah, I just had a great time with Final Fantasy XIV, Dawn Trail included. If you didn't, that's fair enough, but I thought it was quite good, and I really enjoyed it. So, anyways, that's gonna do it for my top 18 plus games of 2024, which is actually going to be releasing almost a month after the end of 2024, because it just took me a while to record the audio for this narration. Sorry. But if you don't like that, well, deal with it. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this, and please like, comment, and subscribe. More Let's Plays and short little one-shot type dealios coming soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. So long for now, everyone.